Honorable Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu and President of DMK, M.K. Stalin, Mr. P. Wilson, leaders and speakers from various organizations, and people here in the audience. Good evening to you all. Just a week ago, we observed the 75th anniversary of the adoption of our Constitution. So ideally, after 75 years of our existence as a constitutional republic, we should have been talking about the maturing of the republic, deepening of democracy, and expansion of our rights. But we all are aware that we find ourselves in a situation where it's completely the other way around. The entire Constitution is today in danger. When I say the entire Constitution, I really mean it. Every word contained in the preamble of the Constitution is today in danger. There are people going to the court for mutilation of the preamble. They want socialism and secularism to be removed. Luckily, the Supreme Court to hold the preamble to be part of the basic structure of the Constitution, and the words as such are still more or less safe. But if you look at every policy of the government, and if you look at the discourse today, the clamor for complete rejection of the Constitution or subversion of the Constitution, we can very well understand that we are fighting in a situation where the Constitution needs to be really protected. The topic today is about the three pillars of social justice: reservation, caste census, and women's rights. I'll be brief. So before just entering the topic, I think for me the key word is in the preamble, equality. That is the key word. And if we go back to Ambedkar, if we really want to achieve equality, there can be no equality without complete annihilation of caste. Because caste is a system of inequality. So within a system of inequality, within this caste system, without weakening it, without annihilating it, there can never really be crystallization or actualization of equality in the true sense of the term. So when I talk about social justice, I talk about social justice as a step towards equality, and reservation, again, as a step towards social justice. Now, in Bihar, we had caste census, and the caste census outcome told us, it gave us the figures, that 85%, let's say 85% of Bihari society, they belong to the SCs, STs, the OBCs, the EBCs. 15% roughly are the so-called general castes, or some people call them upper castes. Now, if you look at these figures and then consider the way reservation has been subverted already by the introduction of the so-called economically weaker section reservation, 10%. So what you find is almost 100% reservation for the general castes. Because 15% is the population, and if you talk about the economically weaker section within that category of population, you are roughly talking about 10% people. So for 10%, you have 10% reservation, which is 100%. If you talk about privatization of education, you are actually talking about 200%, 300%, 400% reservation for the rich. It's nothing else. So on the other hand, you have, let's say, very minimal reservation. There is a 50% embargo, and that 50% embargo has already been violated by the introduction of EWS 10%. So I think the important thing is, like in Tamil Nadu, you have the reservation in the 9th schedule. I think even for Bihar, for any other state, where we need to cross this embargo, this 50% doesn't make sense. So caste census, and according to the caste census outcome, expansion of reservation, that is the need of the hour. And when I talk about expansion of reservation, I think reservation should also be seen as a kind of tool for increasing representation. There is gross underrepresentation of all marginalized community. So basically, the need of the hour is due and adequate representation for all. Then we are talking about women's rights. And again, women's rights must not be limited to just reservation. Even for reservation, we find that this reservation that has been approved is not going to be implemented anytime soon. So when we are talking about women's rights, we need to talk about women's rights in a comprehensive sense. If we really want annihilation of caste, it is impossible without complete emancipation of women. Because as long as marriages will remain caste marriage, intercaste marriage will remain the exception and not the norm, you cannot have annihilation of caste. And you cannot have intercaste marriage as a norm till half of India's population, India's women, they have greater autonomy, greater freedom, decision-making power to choose about their own, decide about their own lives. So these are all interrelated things. If you are really talking about social justice in that comprehensive sense, you need increased reservation, you need greater women's rights, and certainly caste census could be an important step in that direction. So I think these three demands which have more or less come up, caste census, there is a growing, there is still not 100% unanimity, but there is, I think, growing concurrence, growing convergence, consensus around these three ideas, caste census, greater reservation, and of course women's rights. And I think the time has come when we need to take it up as a core common agenda for everybody committed to the ideal of social justice. In a situation where the Constitution is in danger, every day we'll have to fight for preservation of the Constitution, for protecting of the Constitution. And I'm at one with all my previous speakers who have said that today the entire, even if we talk about some specific issues, we cannot talk about it in a, divorced form. The over compelling this task or agenda of defense of India's constitution and democracy. That is the overarching theme which informs every specific demand, every specific aspect of our movement. But again, within that context, I think social justice, and along with social justice, of course, the preamble talks about justice in general, economic as well as political. And when you talk about equality, Ambedkar continues to remind us that equality, liberty, and fraternity comes as an integral package. Neither can be achieved without the other two. So, in this 75th anniversary of the Republic, which will be on 26th of January, 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution, I think we should renew our commitment to defend India's Constitution and to realize every word in the preamble, a socialist, secular, democratic republic, and whatever the Constitution has committed to India's citizens, complete equality, liberty, fraternity, and complete justice. I think the time has come after 75 years when we have to actually fulfill that constitutional commitment. And I will just conclude with the warning that Ambedkar had given. 75 years ago, when the Constitution was being adopted, he kept on reminding us that equality cannot be just about electoral equality. Without social and economic equality, this political electoral equality will soon lose all its meaning. He kept on reminding us that the soil of India remains undemocratic. This Constitution is just a top dressing of democracy on an undemocratic soil, which means that the soil, that social soil, needs to be democratized. If you cannot democratize that social soil, that undemocratic social soil will tear apart the fabric of the Constitution. And most importantly, what he told us, that if ever India becomes a Hindu Rashtra, that will be the biggest calamity to befall India. And we need to rescue the country from that calamity, which is very much staring us in the face. Thank you all. We all are fellow travelers in this shared battle to defend India's democracy. Thank you all, and thank you, the organizers, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity.